Hello YouTubers. This is a very basic view on knife geometry for people who don't know a lot about it. And if you're an experienced knife enthusiast, then there's probably not a lot here that's new for you. But, if you care to watch it anyway and you notice any mistakes that I make or any glaring omissions, you think ought to be included, feel free to send me a message and I'll see if I can get those corrected or added in during annotations. Now, if you're like me, and you have a deep appreciation for firearms and blades, then you probably have friends and know people who don't share the same level of enthusiasm that you do. And when you're talking to these people and they're using the terminology associated with knives and guns, a lot of times you just get a blank stare because they don't really understand what you're talking about. And because they don't have an extensive knowledge about arms, a lot of times when it comes for them to buy something, they'll either go out and make the mistake of buying something that they'll regret later, or the smart ones will come and ask you a lot of basic questions so they'll have the knowledge they need to go out and make an informed decision. So with that in mind, this is the first of a series I'm going to do on some basics for knives and guns. And this video is going to cover some basic geometry of knife blade styles, as well as the advantages and disadvantages of each one. We got a lot to cover and fairly short time to do it, so let's go ahead and get to it. The first blade we're going to talk about is the traditional or classic knife blade. Now, these blades have a spine that extends straight out from the hilt, and then the cutting edge actually curves up to meet it at the tip. They're very versatile and they're very common, found on a lot of fixed blade household and outdoor knives. They're not really used on folding knives though. I don't think I've ever seen one on a folding knife. A couple other examples here. Just a basic steak knife and Cold Steel's Roach Belly. Again, got some jimping along top here, but the spine is straight and the blade curves up to meet it at the tip. Okay, the next one is going to be the drop point, where the spine curves down slightly to meet the upward curve of the edge. A good example on this Victorinox Swiss Army knife. Here the spine comes out and then it curves down, and the cutting edge actually curves up at the tip to meet the spine of the tip. This one actually has two blades on it. They're both drop points, and they're fairly common on both fixed blades and folding knives. Here's another kitchen knife. You can tell my wife's missing quite a few knives today, but that's okay, she'll get them back. And drop points tend to be kind of sheeple friendly. They're not a very aggressive looking blade, so people in public don't tend to freak out when they see these, as compared to some of these other blades that we're going to talk about. The next one is the clip point, and the clip point is named that because it looks like part of the blade has been clipped off at the tip. Now, clip points can either be straight, like on this Okapi 907E, or curved in the classic Bowie style, like on this Cold Steel Voyager here. And they're very versatile because they make very good cutters, and they also very good for fine tip work because you can get a lot of detail done with that really, really sharp point. Okay. In some cases, like on this USMC K-bar, the clip can be sharpened, and you can use that for small cutting tasks, or in combat situation, it can be used for the back cut. So, one more example here is this Ontario Knife Company Air Force Survival Knife, and that has a very pronounced curve in the clip, as you can see, as opposed to the relatively straight clip on the Okapi. Alright, spear points. Spear points are very aggressive dagger type blades, and on these knives the spine and the cutting edge both curve to meet each other at the midpoint, which makes these very, very effective stabbing knives. They're not always the best for cutting though, because they usually don't have a lot of swell or belly on the edges, and so they're not necessarily as good for slicing as some of these other knives. Spear points, because they are aggressive, do tend to raise eyebrows when they're out in public, especially if you were to whip out a big one like this, Boker Shans, or even in the case of small ones like this Safemaker 2 from Cold Steel. And it's a small push dagger, and people will definitely notice if you have this out, as opposed to being perfectly comfortable with a knife, 3 times the length, just because it's more classic styled or a drop point. Some other examples we have up here are Kershaw Amphibian. It's a small diving knife, and I haven't been diving in years, but I always liked that little knife, so I just sort of bought it for a collector's piece. And a Valor boot knife, and Cold Steel's Peacekeeper 1. Now this will definitely get somebody's attention. But as you can see on most fixed blade spear points, both sides tend to be sharpened, so you have a double edge. So the knife is not that versatile for like woods crafting. If you went out in the woods and you were trying to baton something, this knife would fail miserably, because it would either end up cutting your baton off, or if you use something hard enough to drive it through wood, you just end up destroying your edge. Folding knives like the Tylite generally don't have the back edge sharpened, although they may have what we call a false edge on them. But that's because with any part of the blade exposed, if it was sharp, it would definitely have potential of cutting you in the pocket. And here I have a Dalton Wings custom balisong, and it's not a good idea to sharpen both sides of a spear pointed balisong for obvious reasons. You'd end up losing some fingers pretty quickly. I think it has been done, if I recall correctly. Cold Steel made a balisong known as the Archangel that had a double-edged spear point, and I think that's just absolutely insane. Okay, the next knife is the American Tanto, and it's a modern adaptation of an old Japanese style blade. A good example here is the Cold Steel Kobun, and Cold Steel's Lynn Thompson claims to have invented this blade. Truth is, it's probably more accurate to say that he revived the blade, made it more popular, as it was actually used in Japan many years ago, as I understand it anyway. Now, the points on these knives are angled straight edges, which amounts to giving them 2 points. Okay, you have your primary point out here on the end, and then you have a Tanto point back here further back. Now these knives are very strong, and they can pierce hard materials very well, and they also allow for what we call snap cuts. Snap cut is just a quick flick of the wrist, which allows the Tanto point to pierce the skin, and then both your primary edge and the forward edge cut into the flesh, widening the wound from that point. So you can make a really nasty wound with very minimal and quick motion with the Tanto. Here's another one. This is a Gigan Guardian. This is a neck knife. I don't wear it as a neck knife. I carry it around in my day pack, so anytime I'm going to work or whatever, this always goes with me. And I've had this knife for many years. I really like that. So, the next blade is the sheep's foot, and the sheep's foot is not something I have a lot of. I do have an example of it here on this Buck 301V, old pen knife, and it's kind of opposite of the traditional blade in that the spine actually curves all the way down to meet a straight running cutting edge. Now, I'm told, read that this was designed to actually trim the hooves of sheep, from where it gets its name, and that the design allows you to get a lot of control on a knife because you can put your fingers anywhere along that spine while you're doing trimming without any danger of cutting yourself. I'm also understanding that they were used on old sailing ships a lot because running around with a sharp pointy object in rough seas was generally not a good idea. The only other example I have is on this old Stanley utility knife. This thing's about 30 years old, and these blades are disposable. But in the 30 years I've had it, and I usually use this for like leather work and trimming stuff, I've only replaced that blade about 2 or 3 times, so it's held up well over the years. But as you can see, again, that's that traditional sheep's foot design. Alright, the next blade is the kukri, or as Westerners like to call them, kukri. They were developed by the Nepalese Gurkhas, and it's their traditional blade. Kukris have a narrow neck with a recurved head with a deep belly on them, and that makes them wicked choppers. Now this is Cold Steel's light terrain chopper, and it's aptly named because it will definitely chop through anything light, and it'll go through some heavy stuff too. This big recurved head actually gives you the chopping power of an axe, but with the versatility of a knife, since you have much more blade. Cold Steel also makes a folding version of this in their Raja series. Now this is the Raja 1, which they don't make anymore. They do still make the Raja 2, which is the same size as this, and they now make the Raja 3, which is about half the size, a much smaller knife. And in between there, they also have the Spartan, which is another modified version of a kukri blade. And they're all really, really good cutters. And so basically that's it. Those are the basic types of knife blades that you're going to run into, and they all have advantages and have disadvantages, and a lot of it comes down to personal preference and sometimes what's suitable. There are places that have laws just because something has a Bowie clip on the tip that it's an illegal knife, whereas a knife the exact same size with a drop point on it is perfectly legal. Alright, so that covers basic knife shapes. Next video I'm going to do is going to cover the geometry of edge grinds, and I'll do another video later on folders versus fixed blades. So, alright, hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.